Thank you very much. And it is wonderful to be here with all of you today. To begin with, I will give you a little background about myself, and then I will dive into the topic. And after my talk, we will have Q&A where you can ask me any question you like. So first of all, I am the chairman and CEO of Founderspace, which is a global startup incubator and accelerator. We actually have over 50 partners in 22 countries. We are very active in Asia. In China specifically, we do a lot. We have Founderspace incubators in cities like Hangzhou, Songshan Lake, Xi'an, Nanjing, Wuhan, and I travel back and forth between China quite often when there isn't a quarantine. Unfortunately, now the quarantine makes it very difficult to do, but I hope to be back in China and in Hong Kong very soon, maybe in the spring when things open up again. Founderspace has been ranked by Forbes magazine and Entrepreneur magazine as the #1 accelerator for overseas startups. In addition to running Founderspace, I am the author of 3 award-winning books, and you may have heard these. They are also bestsellers in China. One is Make Elephants Fly. That is all about the process of radical innovation. The other, published by HarperCollins, is Surviving a Startup, which is exactly what the title says. It's about everything you need to do to survive, and I will give you a little taste of this tonight in our talk. And my third book, The 5 Forces That Change Everything, is about how technology will transform our society, every industry on the planet, and our lives in the coming decades. So it's the future, our future, as determined by our technology. Today, I will dive into Startup Survival Guide, and I will hopefully give you some insights into what's going on right now and what you can do to make your startup successful, even in these chaotic times. The first thing I want to say, and for those of you who know it already, it's that doing a startup is never easy. I have founded 3 venture-funded companies in Silicon Valley and 2 bootstrapped companies. And I can tell you, in every business that I did, there were times that were extremely difficult, where I thought nothing would go right, where I thought we wouldn't survive, where I really had to struggle. So I know from personal experience what you are going through as entrepreneurs. I also work with hundreds of entrepreneurs every year all around the globe. So I see patterns and things that entrepreneurs do, mistakes that they make. And my goal is to help young, new entrepreneurs avoid those pitfalls and actually become more successful. Because as we know, most startups don't succeed. The majority fail. So what will make you successful? And how can you navigate this very treacherous path? The first thing I tell entrepreneurs is don't fear death. If you're afraid that your startup will die, that you will fail, then you won't take the necessary risks to become a big success. And when I'm talking a big success, I am talking about those startups that are able to scale and grow and become billion-dollar companies, unicorns. You don't get there by being cautious. You don't get there by being conservative. So whatever you're doing, do not scale it back, thinking that will help you gain an edge, thinking that will make it more difficult for you to fail. If you don't take huge risks, you won't get a huge return. They are connected. They are one and the same. So when you're doing a startup, I tell every entrepreneur, don't think smaller, think bigger. Push the limits of what you can do. go one extra step to where people will look at you and say, are you crazy? I don't even think that's possible. If they are saying that to you, you can be darn sure you're on the right path, or at least you may not get there. You may not reach the top of the mountain, but at least you're climbing the mountain. You're reaching for new peaks and new heights. At the same time, you want to think big. You cannot fool yourself. When I talk about doing a startup, I mean, you cannot believe in things that are impossible. If data comes to you telling you that something is not true, just because you're passionate, just because you believe it should be true, doesn't mean it is true. So let me tell you one thing right now. I see so many entrepreneurs who have biases. They filter out information that they don't want to see. And this is true of all human beings. All of us have biases, but it's particularly dangerous when you're a startup founder. So yes, you have to think big, but you also have to see reality for what it is. And by that, I mean, when you go out with your product, when you give it to customers, when customers aren't excited by your product, when they don't fall in love with it, when you aren't getting the feedback that you need, then there is time to recognize that you may not be on the right path. You may have the right overall vision, but the path you're on needs to change. At points like these, where you have gone out with your product into the marketplace and things just aren't working, your product isn't taking off, things aren't going as you planned, this is a normal situation. This happens all the time. But what entrepreneurs fail to do in this situation is ask for help. A lot of entrepreneurs think they should be able to solve all the problems. I will tell you right now, your job is not to solve all the problems. Your job is to show the vision for where you want to go and get other people to solve the problems. So when you run into trouble, the worst thing that you can do as the chairman and CEO of the company is try to solve the problems yourself. If you're smart, you will go to the people around you and you will tap their brains, get their minds working on it, focus them on the most critical problems that you need to solve. The first people you should talk to are your team. You should go to your team every time you have a problem and say, how do we solve this? What do we do next? Where do we go? Your team should be focused on solving these problems, and you should be pointing the direction. You should also look for help outside your company, because people inside your company have one perspective. People outside your company look at things a different way. They have different experience. They are not involved in the day-to-day operations. They will see things that you are blind to. So you need to get really good advisors on your company. And you need to go to them when you run into problems and ask them, how would you solve this? How would you do this? What decisions would you make? Advisors are absolutely critical. People who have deep industry knowledge, people who have a lot of experience running companies, venture capitalists who see the market and see what's going on, bring them in early to help you. One of the most important things you can do as a startup founder is to get your team on board, fully engaged in what you're doing. So it's not enough to have a team. First of all, you need to spend time to get the right people. I tell entrepreneurs out there, when you are starting a company, don't worry about your product. Don't worry about your idea. Worry about your team. You should be spending 80% of your time at the beginning getting the right team members in the right chairs at your company. Getting those team members who can really perform, not B players, not C players, not your friend from college or your own old roommate, but the very best people you can get into your company, you should be recruiting them with your vision. The next thing you should be doing is you should be tasking them with taking your company forward. Your job as CEO is to be a leader. And what leaders do well is they get everybody else to do the work. So you need to get your team on board from day one and say, this is the direction we want to go. This is our vision. For example, we want to make the fishing industry more sustainable. How do we do it? Ask your team, how do we go out there and convince the fishing industry, which really only cares about profits, to be more sustainable? What technologies can we use? What can we do to get them to buy into our vision? And then you send your team out to engage with your customers, to engage them and figure out what to do. What are the solutions? I often say, when you're starting a company, you go to the customer. You go to the customer from the very beginning. As soon as you have your team set up, you start engaging the customer and you let your team learn what is the reality out there. What problems do they face? And then start to create solutions to these problems. When doing a startup, only the best survive. You need to understand that if you go out to all your customers, potential customers, and you show them your vision for a product that you are building for them, and all your potential customers say, that's good, come back later when it's ready, we'll try it out. If they say that, and you've talked to 100 potential customers, if they all say that's good, you will probably fail. Why will you fail if they all say it's good? Because nobody buys good products. We only buy the best. We're always looking for the best product. And that best is an intersection of value, the price of a product and the value it delivers to the customer. Can you hit the point where those two maximize? So when you go to your customers and you want to get them to see if they are going to buy your product in the future, and you ask them, what do you think? And they say it's good. That is the wrong answer. What you need to hear if you are going to be successful is not, it's a good product. It's not, it's a nice product. What you need to hear is, oh my God, this is amazing. How can I get it? When can I get it? Can I be on board? Can I be a beta tester right now? What do I have to do? Can I write you a check? We need that right now. If you don't hear those words, I'm telling you, if a certain percentage of your customers aren't giving you that type of feedback, you don't really have anything. Think about it. When you go out to buy a product, are you going to look for the second best? No, you're going to go for the very best product. Think of the apps you download on your phone all the time. You download an app on your phone. You look at it. Oh, that's pretty good. And then you forget about it. A week later, delete. The app is gone. That is what's going to happen to your startup unless you get the right product market fit, unless you get that reaction I was talking about. One good way, when you don't have a lot of money at the beginning and you want to motivate your team, is to share future profits. Now, there's a lot of different ways to do this. Stock options are a big one, giving equity in your company. And I always tell entrepreneurs, don't be stingy. If you want to get great people, give them a decent share of your company. In the end, you're all going to be incredibly rich if you're successful, or you will have nothing. It doesn't matter that you save a few percentage points here and a few percentage points there. What matters is that you get the best people and motivate them, bring them in, make them owners of your company. You can also, if people want something, they don't want to wait years and years and years for the stock options to pay off. You can motivate your team by sharing profits as they come in. So basically, as you start to make money, as you start to get revenue, you do profit sharing with people on your teams and with strategic partners. It's a great way to grow your business when you are short on cash at the early stages of a company. Be creative. You can do very creative partnering with other companies out there, with consultants, even with your own employees, making them motivated to make you money by sharing that money with them. And then that can prove out your business model. You can bring in venture capital and then grow your business. One thing when you are starting a company is don't count on venture capitalists. I know so many entrepreneurs, and their number one goal is to raise venture capital. I tell them, forget it. That comes afterwards. That comes when you already have figured it out. What you need to be focused on at the beginning are the fundamentals, figuring out your business. You do not want to be focused on raising capital at the beginning. It will, if all you have is an idea and a PowerPoint presentation, that's not enough. You need to go into the real world, get real proof that what you're doing works. And only once you do that will the VCs start to be interested in. I say it tends to be binary. Either it's really, really tough to raise capital, like nobody wants to invest in you, or everybody wants to invest in you. And you are flooded with people, venture people coming to invest in you. It's seldom in the middle. You either figure it out and suddenly you're the hot thing and all the venture capitalists are competing to get in on the deal, or nobody really cares about you at all. Another rule of thumb when you're starting a business is be honest with investors. Do not try to sugarcoat it. Do not pretend that your company is doing better than it is, or that you're bigger than you are, or that you don't face any challenges ahead. When you do this, when you pretend, people can see through it. They know when you are bullshitting. They know when you aren't telling them the full truth. And that erodes their faith in you. There's an entrepreneur I know who is, I won't name him, but he is incredible, because what he did was every investor he went to, he not only showed them everything he believed, his vision, the marketing forecasts, all the revenue forecasts, everything. He also took time to show them all the problems his company faced, all the challenges they had. He was completely transparent with them, completely honest. And you know what happened? The investors loved him. They were like, oh my God, so few entrepreneurs will come to us and actually show us what's really going on. They're just trying to sell us. They're not actually informing us about this business and everything you're doing. And he had no trouble raising money. It wasn't perfect. Investors don't expect your business to be perfect. But if you aren't upfront with them, they won't really trust you. This person built the business and grew the business with the investors' money. But at a certain point, the business started to plateau. It wasn't growing as fast. And he decided he wanted to sell. So he went to one of the biggest media companies in the world, Disney. And he went to them and he did the exact same strategy. He didn't try to pretend that their business was incredible, but he showed them what they had, what they figured out, the value they had created. And then he also explained that the revenue was plateauing and they could benefit a lot from joining a bigger company. And he laid it all out on the table, everything. Disney turned to him and they said, nobody's ever done this before with us. Nobody's ever showed us, behind the curtain, what's really going on in the way you have. You know what? We like you. We're going to acquire you. And they acquired him. He had a great exit. And this strategy of being honest with investors applies to board meetings too. When you are with investors, the worst thing you can do is pretend things are going well when they aren't. If things aren't going well, what you need to do is just level with investors. Just tell them, put it on the table. Because if you try to cover it up, it only makes the problem bigger. If you pretend things are going better than they are, and they're not going well, the investors will eventually find out. They will find out but the problem will be bigger by that time because you've covered it up. If you look at investors as your partners, as there to help you, your other board members, and get them on board to solve the problems with you, it will be so much easier, and you will have so many more brains actually working with you to make progress, instead of having those brains sitting idle with misinformation. Always be honest with investors. Time is money. Anything you can do to save time equals money. Now, let me tell you, one entrepreneur I worked with, he was pretty amazing. He had exited a company before. He had worked at Adobe, one of the top creative guys there. He launched this startup, and he made an incredible video about what the startup does. And I always tell entrepreneurs, make a video. Videos are powerful. He basically showed his whole product in a very professional video, as if it were completed when it really was just an idea. He had investors flocking to him, but he came to me and he said, I am going to tell them my valuation is 15 million pre-money. And I looked at where he was with his startup and I go, you're pretty amazing. Your vision is amazing, but you're not going to close funding at 15 million, maybe at 10 million, probably at 5 million. He wouldn't listen. He absolutely wouldn't listen. He goes, no, we're worth 15 million. So he ended up wasting a year and a half trying to raise money at this inflated valuation. And you know what? After a year and a half, he came back to me and he said, I just closed a deal. I closed a deal at 5 million. He wasted all that time trying to get a little more money. I tell you, by that time, by a year and a half later, he was behind. Other companies had the same idea and they were out ahead of him. Do not do this when you're starting a company. Always focus on what you can get now, what the market will give you now. Listen to the market. Time is money. Money is time. As an entrepreneur, you have to learn to do more with less. So a lot of people say, startups with no money are at a disadvantage. I like to say startups with no money have to be more creative. They have to think, differently than people who have lots of money. And that can be an advantage. You can figure out how to do things in ways that other people wouldn't. You can learn new efficiencies. You can take advantage of new technologies. You can learn how to use your people better. All of this that seems like a disadvantage can actually work to your favor. I have seen entrepreneurs out there do amazing things with no money at all by getting other people involved, getting other people excited about what they're doing. And they wouldn't have done this if they had millions of dollars in the bank. They would have spent it more on traditional online marketing. So they would have been marketing and getting in customers. But because they couldn't do that, they had to do events. They had to do guerrilla marketing. They had to be out there with the customers, talking to them in person, convincing them to use their product. And they started to learn from that process. Turn your disadvantages into your advantages. Do more with less. I want to ask you a question. Should you stick with your plan? We all make plans. Every company is a plan. At any moment in time, you have a plan. Should you stick with it? The answer is absolutely not. You should never stick with your plan because the world is changing. Because you, as a young startup, are always learning new things about your market, about your customers, about the world itself, things that you don't know. So every month, you should be revising your plan. Every month, you should be prepared to pivot. You should be prepared to change direction. That is what doing a startup is all about. Try something different. When things aren't working, when you have a headache, when it feels like you are pushing a boulder up a hill, do something different. Do something nobody else is doing. I will tell you, there are only two ways for a startup to succeed. Number one is that you figure out how to do something not incrementally better than all your competitors out there, but exponentially better, orders of magnitude better than anybody else in the market. That's one way to succeed. If you can't do that, the only other way is to do something different, to think differently, solve different problems that people aren't solving. I like to say entrepreneurs, great entrepreneurs, they are not just coming up with ideas to start a business. They are hunting for demand. Listen to this, being a great entrepreneur is being a demand hunter, because what you do is you go out into the real world, you look for pockets of pent-up demand that's out there, of customers really needing something that they aren't getting from anybody else, and you tap into that. And if those customers' needs are strong enough and it's a big enough market, it turns into a gusher, like an oil well gushing out, and propels your business into a unicorn. Hunt for demand by looking for these different things that entrepreneurs, that nobody else, none of the existing players are giving potential customers. Tech won't save you. I have seen companies with the best technology in the world, the best products in the world. You can go out there and build a product that's flawless, that's perfect, that is the most beautiful product in the world. But if there isn't demand for your product, it will go nowhere. The same is true for technology. You could have the most advanced technology in the world, but if it doesn't solve a problem for somebody else, it's just technology. It's an academic exercise. It means nothing. Nobody, no customer actually cares about your technology. What they care about is what you can do for them. What can you do for them? What value can you give them? This is all that customers care about. The technology itself is just a means to providing value. And if it doesn't provide superior value, throw out the tech. I don't care if you've worked on it 7 years or 7 days. The technology, if it doesn't help the customer in some significant way, it's worthless. Discover demand. So your job as an entrepreneur, as I said before, is to go into the world and discover demand. How do you do this? Well, you do this, the best way to do this is to actually start a dialogue with your customer, a two-way dialogue, where you're not trying to sell them something. You are talking to them and listening to them. You are hearing what they are telling you, what their pain points are, what they're not getting, what drives them crazy. You are listening to these things and you are figuring out, like a detective, wow, there's this demand here. These customers, like if you're serving the restaurant business, that is your focus. You want to modernize the restaurant business. So you go in there, you go to restaurants, you talk to the chefs, you talk to the owners, you talk to the waiters, and you listen to them and you observe them and you see, wow, these people, this is what they really want. This is what would really change their lives. And then you go out and you start building it. You don't build it before you talk to them. You first go into the world and discover demand. If you run into problems at any time during your business, if you aren't making progress, if your sales aren't growing, if your customer is plateauing or actually losing money, the answers lie with your customers. I'll say it again. Go to your customers, ask them, if your business isn't going well, if customers are leaving, if they're not paying you what they should be paying you, go to them and ask them. It's that simple. What do you really need? Why don't you value the services we're providing? And they will tell you. They have the answers. business model. Really, it's important to develop a great business model. So I tell entrepreneurs out there that when you are thinking of your business, think about one thing, and that is recurring revenue. Recurring revenue. And I will tell you why. Because getting a customer, acquiring a new customer, is one of the hardest things a startup does and the most expensive thing. So getting in customers, you spend a lot of money and time finding and bringing in these customers. Once you get a customer, you never want to let go of that customer. A customer that comes to you, buys something once, and then leaves and disappears and you never hear from them again, that's a really tough business to run because you always have to go out and get new customers. The businesses that scale, the businesses that grow into unicorns, these businesses tend to have one thing in common. When they get a customer, they hold on to that customer and they keep making money from that customer over and over and over, whether it's Amazon or Alibaba, whether it's Tencent or Facebook, whether it's Twitter or Google. When they get a customer, they don't let go of that customer. They lock that customer into their ecosystem and they continually monetize that customer. They might not get a lot of money up front. They might not get any money up front. The customer may join for free. But over time, that customer begins to give them money in exchange for value. Money in exchange for value, and they never let that customer go. If you can do this, you have a good business model. Perseverance. Doing a startup is tough. The number one thing that an entrepreneur needs to do is persevere. You cannot let the downs knock you out of the race. Everybody gets knocked down. I like to say your life is a story. If it was easy, if you just started a company and became a gazillionaire overnight, then it wouldn't be a great story. We like stories with drama, stories where the hero and heroine are getting beaten up, knocked down, but they get back up again and they go on and fight. This is perseverance. This is the attitude you need to have. You need to see every time there's a setback, every time there's a problem, it is not a bad thing. It is a new challenge, a new chance for you to prove yourself. If you have this attitude, you can succeed eventually. Always treat your life as an adventure. For me, everything I do, I don't look at it whether I'm not going to worry about whether I fail or I succeed. I'm not going to worry about what other people think. I'm going to think of this as my adventure, my story that I'm living out. And no matter what happens, that's part of the adventure. You know, if my startup becomes the next huge thing, incredible. If it doesn't, if we go down in flames, another story, another adventure, and I will be off to the next thing. Have that attitude. I want to thank you so much for listening to my talk. I'm going to open it up to Q&A, but before I do, I want to tell you how to reach me. You can all find me on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn, very easy. Search for Steve Hoffman or Founderspace. You can also go to founderspace.com to find me. And you can find all my books there, as you can see below. So now we're going to do some Q&A, scan the QR code, and ask me your questions. I have one request for you, and that is that when you ask me your questions, keep the questions short. Keep them to 1 sentence, 2 sentences maximum. Don't write paragraphs. That's too hard to read and too hard to answer in a short time. Thank you.
So for on-site audiences, you can also simply raise your hand and talk out the question directly. Okay.
Steve,
Yes.
I guess it's good evening your time, is it? I don't know
Yes,
where you are.
it is.
You're in Silicon Valley, assume, or?
I am in Silicon Valley.
Good. I'm not a young guy. I'm an old guy. I've been around the block. I advise companies. I raise money. All your advice is, but I lived 10 years in Silicon Valley, so I think I met you. But anyway,
Yes.
the question is there anything different through the years to be a successful entrepreneur? Has anything changed? COVID, whatever, through the years, is the formula still the same? Or the other question is, what are the key failures? Lots of failures. What usually are the causes of failures? Are failures good thing or bad thing?
Sure. So have things changed? Yes, they have changed a lot. And honestly, they've gotten a lot easier for entrepreneurs. They're honestly in Silicon Valley right now, and I believe the same is true in China. It's never been a better time to start a company. Like the money is flowing. There is so much money out there. And entrepreneurs are able to get better terms when they negotiate with venture capitalists than they ever have before. Entrepreneurs, once you figure it out, you are in the driver's seat. It is an amazing time to be an entrepreneur. There are also new technologies coming out at a faster rate than ever before, which means so many new opportunities. So if you are looking back and thinking it was good in the past, it's much better now, and it will be even better in the future. What are the causes of failure? So I will give you the top three. Number one, sticking with your idea too long. More entrepreneurs fail by sticking with their idea too long than changing ideas very rapidly. Really smart entrepreneurs I know, they'll try something, doesn't work. Try something else, doesn't work. Try something else, seems like it's working. No, it's not working, until they hit it big. Number two, reason for failure is that you do not listen to feedback. You block it out. Too many entrepreneurs do what I call fall in love with their baby. Their baby is their product. They fall in love with it. And if anybody says their baby's ugly, they won't listen. So they end up not fixing the real problems because they will not see reality for what it is. Number three, the third reason entrepreneurs fail is because they go into the market with a product that isn't great. And I said this in my talk earlier, but honestly, if you have a good product, if you think my product is good, you're not going to become a big company. You might be a small business, maybe a medium-sized business, but unless you truly know we are building the best product of its kind, if you're not aiming for that, just don't be an entrepreneur, honestly.
Thank you, Steve. So online, I also get some questions.
Sure.
One of them asks, how should a leader resolve conflict within the team?
This is a great question. So many entrepreneurs have this problem. So you have to go to the root of what the conflict is. Usually conflict erupts because of miscommunication. People aren't talking, they aren't understanding one another and where they're coming from. So if there's miscommunication, your job as the leader of the company is to make sure people open up, make sure people talk. Google did a study of teams, and they found out that the best teams, the best performing teams, were not the teams with the best people, with the all-star players, the ones who are the top, people in their field. The best teams, the ones that actually performed the best, were the ones with the best communication. And communication came down to trust. Do you trust the other people on your team? Can you rely on them? Can you open up and speak your mind without fear that they'll criticize you or stab you in the back? Teams that came together like this, they actually ended up performing incredibly well. They didn't necessarily have the top people on their team, but the team itself was more than the sum of all its parts. So that is my advice to really getting your team to work together well. My second piece of advice is listen. Instead of going around and spending your time telling people what to do, actually ask them what they should be doing. Ask them what the problems are. Ask them what the bottlenecks are. Figure out, get information by talking to them and really listening to what they're saying and what's going on. You can better guide the company.
Great, thank you, Steve. So at the floor, are there any other questions? Because I got a lot from the online one, so I will continue. So someone asked, do you share profit or equity?
Do I share private?
Profit
what-
or equity? Profit
couldn't
or
hear-
equity, sorry.
Do we share profit or do I share profit or
Yeah,
equity
yeah.
in my business?
Right.
So as Founder Space, we do. We share both profit and equity with our partners all the time. It's a great way. It's allowed us to scale our business. That's how we've grown around the world, actually. Doing deals with different partners in different countries where they take ownership and we share the profits and equity with them.
Okay, thank you. So someone asked, could you share with us a case that an entrepreneur learned from a failure and reached success eventually?
Okay. So I can share a number of cases like this. I've known a lot of entrepreneurs. So I'll tell you one entrepreneur I was working with that they had built a very sophisticated system for encoding videos. So you know when you upload a video to YouTube or any other website and that video has to be encoded quickly, you're waiting for it to encode? Well, they had built one of the most advanced systems for that. And they had gone out to all their different customers and tried to get their customers to buy their hardware and set up this video encoding hardware platform at their locations. They were failing. It was brutally hard. At a certain point, I came across these entrepreneurs and I was like, well, what's the problem? Why isn't this working? And they were like, well, you know, it takes us a long time to set up the whole system. The customers don't want to spend all the money for the hardware. They don't know how to maintain the hardware. It's a big process. At that point, they were basically ready to go under. I turned to them and I said, why not just build one system, your own system for yourself, and then have an API and put it in the cloud and allow all your customers to connect through it to the cloud. They hadn't thought of this. This was in the early days when cloud computing was in the early stages. They actually took this path, totally transformed their company. That one thing totally transformed their company, and they got a lot of venture capital, and they just kept growing like crazy. I'll give you another example that you all know of. This is a company, they launched a video dating site. And that video dating site was failing because this was in the early days of the internet. Nobody wanted to date by video. And then as they were failing, they looked around and they said, what should we do? And they wanted to share a video with their friends. The founders wanted to share a video with their friends. And they go, well, why don't we upload that video to our video dating site and just share the link? And they did this, and it worked so well. They were like, wow, that was an amazing way to share a video. Why don't we let everybody else do this? And their company took off. It exploded. Do you know what company that was? YouTube. That's how YouTube started. They had failed at launching a video dating site, and they took off by doing link sharing.
Thank you, Steve. So I get another interesting question for you. How to avoid people stealing, copying your business model?
My answer, I get asked this question almost every time I give a talk. And it's a really important question because everybody's worried about their ideas being stolen. I tell entrepreneurs, don't worry about it. Somebody else out there is probably already doing your idea. You just don't know about it. You know, they could be in Finland, they could be in South Africa, they could be in New York. You just don't know about it, but they're doing the same thing. What will determine whether you're successful is not worrying about whether somebody's stealing your idea. Because honestly, the first time you go public with your idea, the first time you talk to a reporter and a blogger and they write something up, you put it on Kickstarter, anything, then the word is out about your company. So just don't worry about it. What you need to do, what will determine whether you're successful, is not keeping your idea secret. What will determine whether you're successful is, can your team execute on the idea better than anybody else? Can they move faster than the competition? Can they build a much better product than the competition? Can they look out and raise the capital they need, more capital than the competition? These are the factors that will determine whether you're successful. So focus on them. Don't focus on keeping your idea secret. Now, I'm not saying go to a conference, a room full of competitors, and announce what you're doing at an early stage. Don't do that. But what I am saying is, don't worry about it. If you're talking to venture capitalists, if you're talking to advisors, if you're talking to customers and partners out there, don't worry about keeping your idea secret. They're probably not going to steal it. And at the end of the day, they will only beat you if they execute better than you.
Great. So there's a follow-up question on that. How to differentiate against copycat competition, who are just marketing but not executing the technology?
So you're always going to have copycats. But what really matters, first of all, if you execute really well, building your brand matters. So brand matters because people will gravitate towards the market leader, the perceived market leader. So taking the crown and showing that you are the one leading this market, you are the one setting the standards, pays huge dividends down the road. Really, all of us, like when we think about what products we use, we're like, what is everybody else using? Who is the market leader? We don't really have time to filter through all the features and everything. If you have a few extra features than your competitor, nobody cares, right? But if your name is bigger, if people are talking about your company more than anybody else, that's what people respond to. So that's what you need to focus on for copycat competitors. Now, of course, if you're doing a product that can be easily copied, you're going to be in trouble. So there are a lot of companies out there that will launch a product on Kickstarter, some gadget or something, and then 100 other companies will pop up and copy that gadget. And they have almost the same thing, and they do it at an even lower cost. Very tough to compete in a market like that. Before you can build your brand, you just get overwhelmed by competitors. If you're in that type of business, get out. You're never going to be big. It's never going to work. What you need is some barriers around your product, barriers to entry. Now, great barriers to entry are this. When you get a customer to your product, you lock them in so they can't jump to a competitor. But you don't lock them in by force. You lock them in by giving them value that they can't get elsewhere. And I call this building platforms, not products. When you go into the marketplace, don't think of building a product. Think of building a platform. And the difference is this. A platform is an ecosystem where you bring multiple parties in. And the more those parties use your product or service, the more value they get out of it. So the more they're using it, the more value they're creating for themselves and for other people using the platform. Most great big companies do this. You look at Amazon. The more buyers they get and the products are available, and the more sellers they get. So it's buyers and sellers. And the more they bring in of both, the more value they create for both. So the more buyers they get, the more sellers want to come. And the more sellers there are, the more product selection, the more competition there is, the more buyers come. They created a whole ecosystem out of Amazon. You look at WeChat or Facebook, same thing. All your friends are there creating value by creating content. You can't transport all those friends to a new social network. Very hard to do. They lock the customers in. They create these moats. Think about this when you're doing your business.
Great. So there's someone asking, you talked about be honest to your investor. However, is there anything that you still recommend us to must hide?
What you must hide from your investors? That's a good question. And, it's very hard for anybody to be 100% honest, about everything that's going on. Let's say you're having trouble with some employees. Do you tell your investors everything? No, you don't. I don't think you should be dishonest with them. If they ask something like, are you having trouble with this employee? And you are, you tell them, yeah, we are actually, because they noticed it. But what I say is that all the information you give them should be honest. They don't need to know absolutely everything about your business. Like your investor, they don't need to know all the details. What you want to do is focus on giving your investors and giving your board members information that they can use, that they need to know about to make decisions for your company. And this is especially true when your investors become your board members. They are going to be running the company with you. So if you are hiding information from them, you are making their job much harder because they're not getting the full picture. They're not going to be able to advise you and make decisions in the right way. So do they need to know all the little things going on in your company? Absolutely not. Do they need to know the big things that are going to really impact your business? Absolutely yes.
Great. And one attendee asked, how many years normally for startup it's good to try and survive?
How many years? So most startups take a long time. Like we hear about them and it seems like it's overnight, but before, like in the United States, before most startups go public, it's usually 8 to 12 years. Now with SPACs, things are happening faster, but before SPACs, it was 8 to 12 years. SPACs are sort of a shortcut on the system. Also with ICOs, if you're in the crypto world, those can happen overnight, literally. They can happen quite fast. So it really depends on the type of business you're in. If you're running kind of a traditional startup with a traditional venture capital going through the standard path in the United States, it takes a while. China, things can happen faster. Hong Kong, things can happen faster. But these things still take years and years and years. To develop a great business, it takes time. So that's the answer to your question.
Right. Another question is, when is the right time to seek for funding?
Okay. It's not the right time to seek for funding early on. So when you're just starting out, don't worry too much about the money. The smartest thing you can do is pick an idea, because there are a gazillion ideas out there. There's so many ideas out there in the world that you can do. Don't pick, if you're not famous, if you're not rich, don't pick an idea that requires a huge amount of capital to get started, because that's going to be a tough one. If you pick an idea like software, where it's really sweat equity can do most of the work, and then focus on getting that team working for equity, creating your product or service. That is the smartest thing you can do, especially if it's your first time doing a startup. Pick one that's very low cost entry, and then you don't have to worry about getting money. Maybe you'll get a little angel money, maybe you'll get a little money from family and friends, just enough to kind of prove out your idea. But when you get the big money, when you get real venture capital interested in your business, usually, not always, but usually it's when you can show them proof. When you can prove to them, even with a small sample, that your assumptions that you will make money and that this business can scale are true. So you build a small version of your product, a minimum viable product. You get it out into the marketplace. You get customers using it. You get their feedback. You start to gather data on, are they willing to spend? Are they engaging with your product? Are they returning? All these different things. You present this to investors, boom, the money starts flowing. That's when it becomes easy to raise capital. So before that, when it's really, really hard to raise capital, you don't want to spend too much time doing it. You want to spend time actually exploring experimenting, discovering new things in the world, bringing that all together. And then later, once you've figured it out, that's when it's time to really start approaching larger investors, not the very early stage angel investors. You can approach them earlier, but the seed round, the pre-Series A, the Series A, all that comes later.
Thank you. So we only have like 2 minutes, so maybe we come to the last question of the day. In the new normal, how do startups use data in their business?
Oh, so data is more important than it ever was because data fuels AI. It basically what makes AI smart. If you have good data, you can have incredibly smart AI. If you have bad data, you don't. If you have good data, you can own something proprietary that gives you a competitive edge against your customers. Think about services like Netflix. Why is Netflix so valuable? Like anybody can launch a video service. All the big media companies have all that content. Why are they having trouble competing with Netflix? Because Netflix did an incredible job of getting data from their users, getting data, analyzing that data, and using that data to develop their own proprietary content that they know their viewers, their audience, their customers will love. And they're using that data over and over again in an extremely efficient manner and effective manner. So data, no matter what business you're in, can be that thing that separates you from everybody else. So if you move first ahead of other people, you get more and better data to them, then you can outcompete them. This is why data is so valuable.
Thank you so much, Steve, for your Q&A session, very interactive. And so do you have a last, maybe a 1 minute to wrap up your
Sure, yes,
session?
absolutely. So I just want to say I love working with great entrepreneurs. If you have a business plan, you can go to Founderspace and submit it. My team will review it. I also look forward to opportunity to come to Hong Kong, engage with all of you personally, meet you. I think it's much more fun to do things in person. So I can't wait for the first opportunity to fly over there and meet you all face to face. Thank you so much.